For my daughter's 6th birthday, my mother-in-law gave her a cute brown teddy bear as a gift. My daughter looked happy at first, then froze. "Mommy, what is it?" I looked closer and went pale. I did not shout. I took action. 3 days later, federal agents were kicking down their doors. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to outsmart toxic family members who thought you were weak. I am Gwen, 34 years old, and I spent my entire childhood bouncing between the hardest foster homes in the state. I fought for every single thing I have, clawing my way up to become a senior forensic accountant in Chicago. I track dirty money, find hidden corporate assets, and uncover complex lies for a living. You would think my husband Trent, a vice president at his family real estate firm, would respect my intelligence and drive. Instead, his family used my background as a constant weapon. They viewed me as a charity case, who should be endlessly grateful they allowed me into their wealthy elite circle. The tension finally erupted last Saturday during my daughter Lily's 6th birthday party. We hosted the event in the sprawling backyard of our suburban house. The catering was unnecessarily expensive, the guests were exclusively Trent's wealthy business partners, and the atmosphere was suffocating. My mother-in-law Beatrice arrived a full hour late, demanding everyone's immediate attention. She wore a pristine designer suit and carried a condescending smile that never quite reached her eyes. She bypassed me entirely without a greeting and walked straight to Lily. "Happy birthday to my only perfect grandchild, Beatrice," announced loudly, handing Lily a large, beautifully wrapped gift box. Lily tore off the wrapping paper with excitement and pulled out a heavy, incredibly realistic brown teddy bear. She hugged it tightly against her chest. Then she pulled back and frowned. Her small finger pointed directly at the bear's face. "Mommy, the bear's eye is blinking red." I knelt beside her and peered into the dark glass eye of the toy. The blood instantly drained from my face. My professional training kicked in immediately. Behind the glossy plastic pupil was a tiny, perfectly integrated camera lens. The faint rhythmic flashing of the red light indicated it was currently recording and transmitting a live feed. My mother-in-law had casually handed a surveillance device to my child in the middle of a party. I reached out and gently took the bear from Lily. "Beatrice, why is there a camera hidden inside a toy for a 6-year-old? The surrounding guests went dead quiet. Conversations halted. Trent marched over from the patio bar, his face flushed with sudden anger. He snatched the bear roughly from my hands. "What is wrong with you, Gwen? You are making a massive scene in front of my partners." "Trent!" I said, keeping my voice incredibly steady, despite the adrenaline rushing through my veins. "There is an IP camera inside this bear." He rolled his eyes and let out a harsh, mocking laugh that echoed across the yard. "You are acting like a paranoid street orphan again. My mother buys an expensive high-tech interactive toy for our daughter, and you immediately treat it like a criminal threat. Not everyone is out to get you. You are not fighting for your life in the foster system anymore. Grow up." The public humiliation burned my cheeks. He brought up my childhood trauma right in front of his wealthy friends, just to silence and discredit me. Beatrice placed a perfectly manicured hand on Trent's arm and sighed dramatically. "I just wanted to give my granddaughter a luxury item. I suppose people from your background simply do not understand quality, Gwen. It is a smart bear. It responds to motion and light, that is all." Colin, Trent's older brother, chuckled loudly from the patio table. "You really need to get your wife's paranoia checked, Trent. She is ruining the mood of the entire party." I looked at the faces surrounding me. I saw Trent's arrogant dismissal. I saw Beatrice's venomous, triumphant smirk. I saw the harsh judgment of the wealthy guests, who were already whispering to each other. If I screamed, if I smashed the bear open right now on the grass, I would be the crazy, unstable woman they desperately wanted me to be. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to look completely unhinged so they could justify their contempt for me. I forced my jaw to unclench. I forced my muscles to relax. I smiled a calm, polite smile. "You are right. I am sorry. It is a lovely gift. I just noticed a little smudge of chocolate on its fur. Let me take it inside and clean it off so Lily can play with it properly." Before Trent could protest or grab the toy back, I turned and walked into the house with the bear tucked securely under my arm. I did not go to the kitchen. I went straight to the master bathroom and locked the heavy wooden door behind me. I did not cry. I did not panic. I am a forensic accountant. I destroy liars with raw data every single day. I set the bear on the marble counter, its glass eyes still blinking at me. I pulled out my phone and opened a highly specialized network scanner application I use for my corporate security audits. The app quickly mapped every device currently connected to our home wireless network. It listed the smart televisions, our phones, and the tablets. And there it was, an unrecognized device labeled with a strange alphanumeric code transmitting heavy packets of video data in real time. I ran a diagnostic trace on the IP address. I fully expected the data stream to route back to Beatrice's mansion across town. I figured she wanted to spy on my parenting, to criticize my housekeeping, or listen to my private conversations. But the trace route revealed something far more sinister. The signal was not leaving the house at all. The video feed was bouncing off our router and transmitting directly to a local heavily encrypted IP address on the same network. I stared at my phone screen as the numbers resolved into a device name I recognized instantly. The live footage from the teddy bear was streaming directly to Trent's encrypted work laptop, which was sitting on the desk in our bedroom just outside the bathroom door. My husband was not blindly defending his mother, he was actively working with her. They were building a surveillance network inside my own home, and they were using my daughter to do it. I took a slow, deep breath, staring directly into the flashing red eye of the bear. The war had just begun, and they had absolutely no idea who they were fighting. I waited until 3 in the morning. The house was completely silent except for the low hum of the central air conditioning and the rhythmic heavy breathing of my husband beside me. Trent always slept like a rock after drinking his expensive scotch at family gatherings. I slipped out from under the heavy comforter, my bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. I did not turn on any lights. I navigated the dark bedroom by memory, moving directly toward the custom oak desk in the corner. Trent's encrypted work laptop sat exactly where he always left it. He thought he was secure. He thought a complex alphanumeric password and biometric fingerprint lock would keep me out of his private files. He forgot who he married. In my line of work, bypassing standard corporate security is child's play. I plugged a small USB drive containing a bootable operating system into the side port of his machine. Within 4 minutes, I had bypassed the main operating system entirely and accessed his raw hard drive files. I scrolled through years of mundane real estate contracts, golf club newsletters, and offshore bank summaries. But I was not looking for his money right now. I was looking for the destination of that video feed. I traced the local network directory until I found a hidden partitioned drive. It was heavily shielded, requiring a secondary decryption key. I ran a script I had built for corporate espionage audits, letting it crack the encryption while I stood in the dark listening to Trent breathe. When the progress bar hit 100%, a single folder appeared on the screen. The title sent a cold, sharp chill down my spine. Project Custody. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. I opened the folder. Inside were dozens of video files neatly categorized by date and location. Living room, kitchen. Lily's playroom, our master bathroom. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had hidden cameras everywhere, not just in the teddy bear from today. I had been living in a surveillance state in my own home, watched and recorded by the man who vowed to protect me. I clicked on a video labeled Gwen Erratic Behavior, Volume 1. The screen flickered to life. It was footage of me from last Tuesday. I had been exhausted after a 14-hour shift at the firm trying to get Lily to eat her dinner. But that was not what the video showed. The footage had been meticulously edited. The audio was manipulated. My voice sounded harsh, distorted, and cruel. The artificial intelligence generation was subtle but terrifyingly realistic. It showed me screaming at my 6-year-old daughter, throwing a plate of food against the wall, and grabbing her arm roughly. I covered my mouth with my hand to muffle my gasp. None of that had happened. I had dropped a plate by accident that night and laughed about it with Lily while we cleaned it up together. Trent had taken that benign, happy moment and warped it into a scene of violent domestic abuse. I clicked another file with trembling fingers. This one showed me in the bathroom taking my daily vitamin supplement. The video had been spliced with deepfake audio of me slurring my words and stumbling, made to look like I was popping prescription painkillers and completely incapacitated. The sheer evil of it paralyzed me. Trent and Beatrice were not just trying to make me look bad to their rich friends. They were manufacturing digital evidence to prove I was an unfit, dangerous, mentally unstable mother. They were building a bulletproof legal case to take my child away. Every time Beatrice had provoked me in the past, every time Trent had gaslit me about my foster care trauma, they were laying the groundwork for this false narrative. They wanted to destroy me so thoroughly that no family court judge would ever let me near Lily again. I backed out of the video files and found a subfolder labeled Correspondence. It contained exported email chains between Trent and his mother. I opened the most recent message sent just hours before the birthday party. I read Trent's words glowing on the dark screen. "The fake videos are ready, Mother. The audio deepfakes came out perfect. I will file the emergency psychological evaluation by Friday. With this evidence, we will get full custody immediately, and she will not get a single dime of the marital assets. The prenuptial agreement covers us if she is committed to a facility." A cold, heavy stone settled in my stomach. 10 years of marriage. 10 years of building a life with this man, of trusting him with my deepest vulnerabilities, of loving him. And he was actively plotting to throw me into a psychiatric ward and steal my daughter. He wanted to leave me on the streets with absolutely nothing, returning me to the exact situation I had fought so hard to escape when I aged out of the foster system. I reached into my pocket for my own encrypted hard drive. I needed to copy the entire folder right now. I needed every single file, every email, every altered video as proof of their manipulation. I plugged my drive in and initiated the transfer. The progress bar popped up on the screen. 10%, 20%. I kept my eyes glued to the loading screen, silently urging it to move faster. 30%. The files were massive, heavy with high-definition video data. 40%. The silence in the bedroom was suddenly broken by the sound of fabric rustling. The heavy, rhythmic breathing from the bed had stopped. I froze, the blue light of the laptop screen illuminating my terrified face. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. 50%. Before I could even turn my head or reach for the flash drive, a large, heavy hand slammed down on top of the laptop screen, snapping it shut with a violent crack that echoed through the pitch-black room. Trent's heavy hand pinned the laptop screen against the keyboard. The sudden sound cracked like a gunshot in the pitch-black bedroom. I did not flinch. I did not scream. I slowly turned my head and looked up at my husband. His face was a shadow, but I could feel the cold fury radiating from him. "What exactly are you doing on my computer at 3 in the morning, Gwen?" His voice was a low, menacing whisper. I kept my breathing perfectly even. I reached out and gently pulled my flash drive from the USB port. I slipped it into my pajama pocket. "I am looking for the corporate tax file," I said, my tone laced with just the right amount of sleepy annoyance. "I accidentally saved the forensic audit to your shared network folder yesterday. The client has an emergency IRS review at 8 in the morning, and I could not sleep because I was stressing about it." "Why did you slam the screen, Trent? You probably just corrupted my download." He stared at me in the dark, the silence stretched tight as a wire. He was searching my face for any sign of panic, any twitch of guilt. But I had spent my entire childhood surviving predators in the foster system. I knew how to wear a mask of absolute boredom. Trent exhaled slowly. He stepped back and ran a hand through his hair, instantly shifting his posture. He forced a tired, sympathetic chuckle. "I am sorry, honey. You startled me. You know how protective my family is about our real estate contracts. You should have just woken me up." I stood up and stretched casually. "It is fine. I will just reconstruct the spreadsheet at the office. Go back to sleep." I climbed back into bed and turned my back to him. I closed my eyes, but my heart was racing. I had secured 50% of the project custody folder. It was enough to know their plan, but I needed to act flawlessly. Trent thought he had interrupted a simple mistake. But the next morning, the psychological warfare accelerated. He knew his timeline was tight, and he needed his fake evidence immediately. The gaslighting began before breakfast. I was getting ready to take Lily to school, but my car keys were missing from the kitchen counter hook, where I placed them every single night. I searched the countertops, the drawers, the living room table. Trent leaned against the kitchen island, sipping his coffee. He watched me with an intense, calculating stare. "You are always losing things, Gwen," he said, his tone dripping with fake concern. "Your memory has been terrible lately. Are you sure you are not cracking under the pressure at work? You seem very erratic." I paused. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the new smoke detector Trent had installed last week. The tiny black dot on its edge was aimed directly at the kitchen island. He had hidden my keys and wanted to catch me running around frantically tearing the house apart, looking like an unhinged mother who could not even get her child to school. I did not give him the satisfaction. I stopped searching. I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. "I just ordered a premium rideshare," I said smoothly. "It will be here in 2 minutes. I probably left the keys in my desk drawer at the firm. I will have security check later." Trent's smug smile faltered. The attacks did not stop there. The following evening, I went to the medicine cabinet to take my daily allergy medication. I opened the orange prescription bottle and poured a capsule into my palm. I stopped. The weight of the capsule was wrong. The white powder inside looked slightly grainy, unlike the smooth pharmaceutical-grade compound I was used to. Trent had emptied my capsules and refilled them with sugar, or something worse, trying to trigger a physical reaction, or capture me complaining about phantom symptoms on the hidden cameras. I looked at the bathroom mirror. I knew there was a lens behind the vanity light. I popped the fake pill into my mouth, took a sip of water, and smiled at my reflection. I spat the pill into a tissue the moment I walked out of the camera view. I bought real medication on my lunch break the next day. I let him believe his traps were working. By Thursday, Beatrice decided to handle matters herself. I was working at the dining table while Lily was at school. The front door swung open without a knock. Beatrice marched in, wielding her spare key like a weapon. She wore a sharp designer suit and carried a clipboard. She bypassed me entirely and walked straight into the kitchen, pulling open my pantry doors and throwing boxes of cereal onto the floor. "This house is a disaster, Gwen," Beatrice shouted, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "It is filthy. You are feeding my granddaughter processed garbage. You are an unfit mother who cares more about tracking numbers than raising a child." I remained seated at the dining table. I slowly closed my laptop. I knew exactly what she was doing. She was performing for the hidden camera inside the decorative clock on the mantel. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to throw something. She needed me to look like a violent abuser. Beatrice grabbed a heavy glass water pitcher from the counter. She looked directly at me, a wicked gleam in her eye. Then she intentionally dropped the pitcher. It shattered into 100 pieces across the hardwood floor. "Oh my God," Beatrice shrieked, clutching her chest and stumbling backward. "Why did you push me, Gwen? You are crazy. Stay away from me." I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I walked calmly to the utility closet, pulled out a broom and a dustpan, and returned to the kitchen. I began sweeping up the broken glass with slow, methodical strokes. "I am so sorry you dropped that, Beatrice," I said, my voice soft and perfectly controlled. "The floors can be quite slippery. Would you like me to brew you a cup of chamomile tea to calm your nerves?" Beatrice stopped shrieking. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. The terrifying, icy calmness in my demeanor completely broke her script. She could not use this footage. I looked like a patient caregiver dealing with a hysterical elderly woman. "I am leaving." Beatrice snapped, her face turning red with frustration. "You need serious psychiatric help. Have a wonderful afternoon," I replied cheerfully, dumping the shattered glass into the trash bin. After Beatrice stormed out, I needed to get to the bank. I grabbed my purse and walked out the front door, heading toward the driveway. The crisp Chicago wind whipped through my coat, but it could not cool the burning determination in my chest. I walked past the manicured hedges and stopped. A black luxury SUV was parked crookedly across the street, half on the curb. I recognized the license plate. It belonged to Jada, the brilliant corporate lawyer married to Trent's older brother, Colin. Jada had always been poised, intimidating, and perfectly put together, but right now, she was not. I walked cautiously toward the SUV. Through the tinted window, I saw Jada gripping the steering wheel with both hands. Her shoulders heaved as she sobbed hysterically, her face buried in her arms. She was completely broken. I tapped gently on the glass. Jada jumped, gasping in terror. She rolled the window down an inch. Her eyes were bloodshot, her makeup smeared across her cheeks. Jada, what is wrong? I asked, keeping my voice low. She shook her head violently, unable to form words, but as she wiped her face, I saw what she was clutching so tightly in her right hand. It was a massive, ornate diamond brooch. Beatrice had given Jada that brooch last month as a lavish anniversary gift, praising her in front of the entire family. I looked closer at the glittering diamonds. Right in the center, nestled between the shining stones, was a tiny dark glass bead. It was the exact same size and shape as the eye of the brown teddy bear. The family was not just coming for me, they were destroying Jada too. I tapped on the tinted glass of the SUV. Jada jumped, gasping as she looked up at me. I kept my eyes locked on the heavy diamond brooch in her trembling hand. I did not say a word. I unzipped my work tote and pulled out a signal-blocking Faraday pouch. It is a specialized metallic-lined bag I use to transport compromised hard drives during corporate espionage investigations. I held the dark bag open through the narrow gap in her window. Drop the brooch inside, I ordered, my voice leaving absolutely no room for debate. Jada stared at me with bloodshot eyes. She looked completely disoriented, but the terrifying authority in my tone made her obey. She dropped the glittering jewelry into the pouch. I folded the top over and sealed it tight instantly, severing any Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, or radio frequency transmissions. Beatrice was flying blind now. Drive around the block and follow my car to the diner on 4th Street, I told her. Do not go back to the estate. Do not answer any calls from Colin. Just follow me. 10 minutes later, we were sitting in a dimly lit, noisy booth at the back of a crowded diner. The clatter of plates and loud conversations provided the perfect acoustic cover. Jada sat across from me, gripping a ceramic mug of black coffee with both hands. She was an absolute force of nature, a brilliant African-American corporate lawyer who had fought tooth and nail through a deeply prejudiced system to become a junior partner at a top Chicago firm. She was normally fierce, impeccable, and completely unshakable. To see her stripped of her armor, trembling in a vinyl booth, made my blood run cold. Colin filed for divorce this morning. Jada whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of the words. He ambushed me with emergency papers. He is claiming I am mentally unstable, Gwen. He told the judge I have been having manic episodes, that I am violent, and that I pose a threat to myself. My stomach plummeted. I leaned forward, keeping my voice hushed. What does he want, Jada? He wants everything, she spat, anger finally piercing through her tears. He is demanding full ownership of my law firm shares as part of the marital estate division. He claims his family money funded my early career, which is an absolute lie. He wants to leave me penniless and stripped of my legal license due to mental instability. I reached into my bag and pulled out the sealed Faraday pouch. I placed it on the table between us. I need you to listen to me very carefully, Jada. You are not going crazy. You are not unstable. You are being hunted. I opened the pouch just enough to expose the center diamond of the brooch Beatrice had given her for her anniversary. I pointed to the tiny, perfectly disguised glass bead nestled between the stones. That is an IP camera with a high-definition microphone, I said flatly. Beatrice gave my 6-year-old daughter a teddy bear yesterday, with the exact same technology hidden in its eye. Trent and Colin are not just spying on us. They are recording us, provoking us, and using artificial intelligence to edit the footage. They are manufacturing digital evidence to prove we are insane. Jada stared at the brooch. I watched her brilliant legal mind process the information. The tears stopped immediately. Her spine straightened. The terrified wife vanished instantly, replaced by the ruthless corporate attorney who destroyed hostile takeovers for a living. Beatrice gave me this brooch right before Colin started claiming I was acting erratic. Jada said, her tone turning ice cold. She insisted I wear it every single day as a symbol of my acceptance into the family. She would show up at my office unannounced, making subtle racist remarks about my hair or my background, pushing my buttons until I raised my voice. She wanted me to snap while wearing a live microphone. Exactly, I nodded. Beatrice hates that you are smarter than Colin. She resents your success, your independence, and your race just as much as she despises my foster care background. We were never their daughters-in-law. We were trophies they acquired to make their mediocre sons look successful. Now that we have built substantial wealth of our own, we are assets to be liquidated. Jada pushed her coffee mug aside. She reached into her sleek leather briefcase and pulled out her encrypted work tablet. The family trusts. She muttered, her fingers flying across the screen. Colin acts as a co-manager on the family real estate trust with Trent. I received a bizarre automated email from the trust officer yesterday, but I ignored it because I was dealing with the divorce ambush. If they are liquidating assets, I need to see the corporate filings right now. I watched the screen as Jada bypassed the security portal and accessed the private family banking records. She opened a commercial loan document that had been filed and approved just 48 hours ago. My breath caught in my throat. Trent and Colin had taken out a massive $3 million cash loan against the primary family trust. But because the trust was deeply entangled with our marital assets, the bank required spousal guarantors. They needed my signature, and they needed Jada's signature, acknowledging that our personal businesses and homes could be seized if the loan defaulted. Jada zoomed in on the final page of the PDF. There, stamped clearly on the digital dotted line, was my signature. Right below it was Jada's signature. I did not sign this, I whispered, staring at the perfect replica of my handwriting. Neither did I. Jada said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, lethal register. They forged our signatures on a commercial bank loan. They leveraged our homes, my law firm shares, and your consulting business to secure $3 million in liquid cash. The scope of their arrogance was staggering. Trent and Colin thought we were just two emotional, easily manipulated women they could crush in family court. They completely forgot they were married to a forensic accountant and a corporate lawyer. In the state of Illinois, recording someone in a private space without their consent is a felony. Jada stated, her eyes locking onto mine. But forging signatures to secure a $3 million loan from a federally insured bank crosses state lines. That is federal wire fraud. That is bank fraud. That carries a 20-year prison sentence. Where did the $3 million go? I asked, pulling out my own laptop. If they took out that cash, they had to park it somewhere the divorce courts could not touch it. Jada slid the tablet toward me. The money did not go into the family business. It was wired out yesterday afternoon to a blind shell company registered in Delaware. I cracked my knuckles. Give me the routing number. It is time to follow the dirty money. I pulled my laptop from my heavy leather work tote and flipped it open right there on the sticky diner table. The loud clatter of breakfast plates and the noisy chatter of the morning crowd washed over us, providing the perfect acoustic cover. Jada sat across from me, her dark eyes continuously scanning the entrance standing guard while I went to work. I connected my machine to my encrypted mobile hotspot, bypassing any public networks. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I opened my specialized forensic accounting software. Give me the exact routing number you saw on the trust documents, I told Jada, my eyes locked on the screen. Jada recited the long string of numbers from memory. Her brilliant legal mind never missed a single detail. I typed the digits into a secure tracing portal I used for international corporate audits. In the world of high finance, people think moving money is easy. They think wealth creates a perfect shield of anonymity. But money always leaves a digital footprint if you know exactly where to look. I watched the data packets decode on my screen. Trent and Colin had been careful, but they were not professionals. They had moved the $3 million from the commercial bank loan and immediately routed it out of Illinois. It bypassed the family real estate holding accounts entirely, I whispered, tracking the glowing lines of data. They pushed the cash through two domestic intermediary accounts to wash the origin. Now it is sitting in a corporate holding fund registered to a shell company in Delaware. Delaware, Jada scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest. The oldest trick in the corporate fraud playbook. Delaware allows limited liability companies to operate with extreme secrecy. They do not require the names of the true owners to be listed on public filings. Colin thinks his law degree makes him invincible. He is about to find out my accounting degree makes me lethal, I replied. I bypassed the standard public registries and dug directly into the property tax records linked to the shell company. If they took out $3 million in liquid cash, they were buying something massive. My software crawled through the municipal databases matching the anonymous company identification number to recent high-value real estate transactions. A hit flashed on my screen. They used the forged loan as a cash down payment on a luxury penthouse in downtown Chicago. I said, my voice turning ice cold as I read the property deed. It is a $4 million unit. But who signed the closing documents? A shell company still needs a registered agent to legally sign the deed. I ran a reverse search on the electronic signature attached to the property transfer. The security firewall tried to block my request, but I deployed a decryption script that shattered their privacy wall in seconds. The name of the registered agent popped up in bold black letters. I stared at the screen. The air in my lungs vanished. Jada leaned over the table, following my gaze. She let out a sharp, breathless gasp. Vanessa. We sat in stunned silence as the magnitude of the betrayal settled over us. Vanessa was Beatrice's 24-year-old personal assistant. She was a quiet, mousy girl who was always hovering in the background at family dinners, pouring wine, carrying coats, and eagerly laughing at every single one of Beatrice's terrible jokes. Beatrice constantly praised Vanessa in front of us, loudly wishing her sons had found women who were so subservient, agreeable, and respectful of wealth. It hit me with sickening, absolute clarity. Trent was not just trying to steal my daughter and throw me into a psychiatric ward to protect his family money. He was actively financing a brand new life with his secret young mistress. He used my forged signature to leverage my business and pay for their luxury love nest. Beatrice knew everything. Beatrice had likely orchestrated the entire arrangement, using Vanessa as the perfect compliant replacement for the independent woman she despised. They are using my name to buy his mistress a penthouse. Jada hissed, her voice shaking with raw fury. Colin helped Trent commit federal bank fraud to fund an affair. They are going to destroy us and walk away with everything. I did not cry. I did not break down. The foster care system had burned the weakness out of me a long time ago. I opened a blank command terminal on my screen. They are not walking away with anything, Jada. I said, my fingers flying across the keys. I am setting a tripwire. I wrote a highly complex invisible tracking script and embedded it directly into the routing metadata of the offshore account connected to the Delaware Shell Company. It was a digital ghost. If Trent Colin or Vanessa moved a single dollar, transferred a cent, or even logged in to check the account balance, my script would silently capture their exact internet protocol address, physical location, and timestamp. It would automatically forward the encrypted evidence directly to my private server. They were trapped in my digital web, and they had absolutely no idea. Jada and I finalized our immediate game plan. She was heading straight to her office to quietly begin drafting federal fraud affidavits and securing her own law firm assets against Colin's divorce ambush. I had to go back to my house. I had to walk through my front door and play the role of the oblivious, mentally fragile wife. We hugged in the diner parking lot, two women from entirely different worlds, united by the sheer ruthless determination to burn this corrupt family to the ground. I drove home, focusing on the rhythm of my breathing. I pulled into the driveway and slipped my car keys into my pocket. I walked through the front door, forcing my facial muscles to relax into a look of tired confusion. Trent was sitting on the living room sofa, casually flipping through a sports magazine. He looked up and gave me a warm, practiced smile. That smile made my skin crawl. He looked like the perfect, loving husband. "Hey, honey," he said, his voice smooth and easy. "Did you find your keys?" I nodded, pretending to look exhausted. "Yes, I left them at the office just like I thought." "Where is Lily?" "She is upstairs playing in her room," he replied, setting the magazine down. Before I could take off my coat, the doorbell rang. It was not a casual ring. It was 3 sharp, heavy, authoritative knocks that echoed through the quiet house. I walked to the door and pulled it open. A stern-looking woman in a beige pantsuit stood on my front porch holding a thick clipboard. 2 uniformed police officers stood directly behind her, their hands resting near their duty belts. "Are you Gwen?" the woman asked, her eyes scanning me with professional detachment. "Yes, I am," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level. She held up a federal identification badge. "I am an investigator with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous emergency tip this morning containing severe allegations of child abuse, neglect, and erratic violent behavior. We need to speak with your daughter immediately, and we are required to evaluate your home environment." I looked over my shoulder. Trent had stepped out of the living room and was standing in the hallway. His hands were stuffed deeply into his pockets. He was wearing a look of perfectly manufactured, heartbroken shock. He stared at the police officers with wide, terrified eyes, playing the role of the desperate father trying to protect his child from a monster. He had made the call. The fake videos from the hidden cameras had been submitted. Trent was making his move to take my daughter away from me forever. The investigator stepped across my threshold with heavy, purposeful strides. The two police officers followed closely behind her, their hands resting securely on their utility belts. Trent immediately crumpled against the hallway wall, burying his face in his hands. He let out a ragged, desperate sob that echoed through the foyer. "Please do not hurt her," Trent cried, his voice trembling with perfectly manufactured agony. "My wife is just sick. She has lost her mind from the stress at her firm. I tried to handle it privately, but she has become so violent. I just want my little girl to be safe. Please get Lily out of here before Gwen does something we all regret." It was an Oscar-worthy performance. If I did not know he was currently financing a downtown penthouse for his 24-year-old mistress using my forged signature, I might have actually felt sorry for him. The investigator looked at me with cold, hard judgment. "I am Agent Foster," she said firmly. "We received an emergency report detailing severe emotional abuse, erratic behavior, and suspected prescription drug abuse. We were provided with video evidence of you throwing objects and screaming at your child. I need to see Lily right now, and I need you to step into the dining room for questioning." I did not raise my voice. I did not cross my arms. I did not exhibit a single sign of the defensive-aggressive behavior Trent desperately needed me to show. "Of course, Agent Foster," I replied, my voice radiating polite professional warmth. "Lily is upstairs in her bedroom reading a book. Officer, you are more than welcome to go up and speak with her. I have absolutely nothing to hide." Agent Foster blinked clearly, thrown off balance by my complete lack of resistance. Usually parents accused of abuse scream, cry, or try to block the stairs. I simply gestured toward the hallway and walked myself into the dining room, pulling out a chair and sitting down with perfect posture. One officer went upstairs. The other stayed in the kitchen with Trent, who was still pretending to wipe away tears. Agent Foster sat across from me at the dining table, pulling a thick stack of paperwork from her clipboard. "Mrs. Gwen," she began, her tone all business, "we received anonymous video files showing you in a highly agitated state. In one video, you are seen throwing a dinner plate against the wall while your daughter cowers. In another, you appear heavily intoxicated and stumbling in your bathroom. How do you respond to these allegations?" I smiled a very small, very sad smile. "I am a senior forensic accountant, Agent Foster. My entire career is built on verifying data and exposing digital manipulation. My husband recently installed several new smoke detectors and decorative clocks around our home. They contain hidden IP cameras. He and his mother have been recording me without my consent and using artificial intelligence software to alter the audio and visual outputs." Agent Foster frowned, her pen hovering over her paper. "That is a very elaborate defense to make on the spot." "It is not a defense," I countered smoothly. "It is a verifiable fact. But let us look at the physical evidence instead of digital ghosts." I reached into my work tote and pulled out a thick, heavy binder I had prepared weeks ago for a background check at my corporate firm. I slid it across the table. "Open it," I instructed gently. Agent Foster hesitated, then opened the binder. "The first tab contains Lily's complete pediatric records from birth to last week," I explained. "You will note there is not a single unexplained bruise, missed appointment, or sign of malnourishment. The second tab holds her school evaluations. Her kindergarten teacher specifically notes that Lily is thriving, joyful, and deeply attached to her mother. The third tab contains my own annual corporate medical evaluations. I do not drink and my blood tests are immaculate." Agent Foster flipped through the pristine, authenticated documents. The hard paper evidence directly contradicted the picture of the unhinged, drug-addicted monster Trent had painted. I reached into my pocket and placed a sealed bottle of allergy medication on the table. My husband emptied my capsules and replaced them with a grainy powder to try and induce a reaction on camera. "I bought a fresh bottle yesterday. If you want me to take a federal drug test right now, I will happily comply." Furthermore, he claimed I was driving erratically. I pulled up my phone screen showing the digital receipt. I took a premium rideshare to work all week. I have the GPS logs to prove it. The investigator stared at the screen, then back at the binder. The stern, accusatory look on her face began to dissolve into sharp professional suspicion. She looked over her shoulder toward the kitchen, where Trent was pacing nervously. Just then, the police officer came downstairs holding Lily's hand. Lily was wearing her favorite princess dress and holding a drawing. She looked completely relaxed. Agent Foster stood up. "Lily, honey, are you okay?" Lily beamed. "I am great. I drew a picture of a computer lock for my mommy. She catches bad guys at work." The officer looked at Agent Foster and shook his head slightly. "The kid is perfectly fine. Room is clean. No signs of distress, no signs of damage. She said she and her mom baked cookies last night." Trent stepped out of the kitchen, his face twisting in panic. "You do not understand," he pleaded, taking a step toward the officers. "She is manipulating you. She is a psychopath. You saw the videos I sent you. You saw what she did." Agent Foster turned to Trent, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You mean the anonymous videos we received, Mr. Trent? Because filing a false report to Child Protective Services using fabricated digital evidence is a felony. It wastes valuable state resources and traumatizes children. We will be taking those video files to our Cybercrimes Division for metadata analysis. If we find they were altered, you will be hearing from the district attorney." Trent physically recoiled. The color vanished from his face. He looked like he was going to be sick right there on the hardwood floor. The police officers escorted Agent Foster to the front door. "We apologize for the intrusion," Ma'am Foster said, turning back to me. "Have a safe evening." I stood in the foyer watching them leave. Trent was hyperventilating, clutching the edge of the kitchen island. His foolproof master plan had just collapsed into dust. He had tried to play chess against a woman who built the board. Before Trent could formulate a single excuse, the front door flew open. Beatrice stormed into the house wearing a furious, triumphant grin. She had timed her arrival perfectly, expecting to see me being led out in handcuffs and her precious son holding his rescued daughter. "Where is she?" Beatrice crowed, stepping into the foyer. "Have they taken her to the psychiatric ward yet?" I stepped out from the dining room holding a glass of iced water. I took a slow, refreshing sip. "They just left, Beatrice," I said cheerfully. "They loved Lily's drawings." Beatrice froze. Her triumphant smile shattered, falling away to reveal pure, unadulterated hatred. She looked at Trent, who was shaking his head in silent panic. She looked back at me, her fists clenching at her sides. Beatrice marched across the foyer, closing the distance until she was inches from my face. She dropped the wealthy socialite act entirely. The vicious, venomous predator underneath finally surfaced. "You think you are so smart?" Beatrice whispered, her voice a terrifying, raspy hiss. "You are nothing but a worthless street rat. You tricked those gullible state workers today, but you will not win. I have more money and more power than you could ever comprehend. I will buy the best lawyers in the state. I will make sure you end up locked in a straitjacket by tomorrow morning, and I will erase your name from my granddaughter's memory forever." I did not step back. I did not blink. I leaned in close, matching her terrifying energy perfectly. I let a slow, wicked smile spread across my face. "You should really check your Cayman Island accounts, Beatrice," I whispered back. "Vanessa is very expensive to maintain." The color drained from Beatrice's face so fast she looked like a ghost. Her perfectly structured jaw went slack. The absolute terror in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. I had hit the bullseye. She turned her head slowly to look at Trent. Trent looked like he had been struck by lightning. His mouth hung open and his hands were shaking at his sides. The arrogant vice president of real estate was gone, replaced by a panicked little boy who had just been caught stealing millions of dollars to fund his mistress. Beatrice did not say another word. She grabbed Trent by the arm, her fingernails digging violently into the fabric of his expensive suit jacket. She practically dragged him out the front door. They stumbled down the porch steps and climbed into her luxury car. I stood in the doorway and watched her tires squeal against the pavement as she sped away. They were running to check their offshore accounts. They were terrified I had already frozen the money. I locked the front door and went upstairs to check on Lily. She was happily coloring in her room, completely oblivious to the war raging around her. I sat on the edge of her bed and watched her, knowing the next 24 hours would be the most dangerous of my entire life. Trent returned to the house 4 hours later. The sun had set, and the house was quiet. He walked into the kitchen where I was making a cup of tea. His demeanor had completely changed. The aggressive, panicked man from earlier was gone. Instead, he wore an expression of deep manufactured exhaustion. He looked like a husband who was simply trying to save his family. "Gwen, we need to talk," he said, his voice soft and pleading. "My mother has lost her mind. I had absolutely no idea she was hiding money in the Cayman Islands. I am so sorry I did not protect you from her today." I kept my back to him, stirring my tea. His ability to lie so smoothly was chilling. He was pretending he knew nothing about the $3 million forged bank loan or the penthouse he bought for Vanessa. He was throwing his own mother under the bus to save himself. "What do you want?" Trent, I asked flatly. He walked over to the kitchen island and set down a thick legal envelope. He slid a dense bound document onto the marble counter. "I want to protect you," he lied, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. "My mother is preparing to unleash a massive legal team against us tomorrow. She wants to freeze our joint accounts and tie us up in litigation for years. I had my personal attorney draft this post-nuptial agreement this afternoon. It completely separates our marital assets from the family trust. If you sign this, it legally blocks her from touching your consulting business or the house. It also guarantees us a $1 million cash payout from my personal equity. We can take Lily, leave Chicago, and start over fresh." I looked down at the document. It was 70 pages of dense legal jargon. I knew exactly what he was doing. They were terrified of my forensic accounting skills. They knew I could trace the stolen money and send them to federal prison. They needed to strip me of my resources immediately before I could file a formal police report. "I cannot sign this right now," I said, feigning a tremble in my voice. "I need to read it. My head is spinning from the Child Protective Services visit." "Take your time, honey," he said, reaching out to rub my shoulder. I stepped out of his reach. "Just read it over. But we need to file it by tomorrow morning before my mother attacks." I took the document and walked directly to my home office, locking the door behind me. I did not bother trying to read the legal maze myself. I pulled a small, secure button camera from my desk drawer. I clipped it to my collar and opened a highly encrypted video feed on my laptop. Jada answered the secure connection immediately. She was sitting in her own home office surrounded by law books. "Trent just tried to hand me a post-nuptial agreement," I whispered, angling the camera so Jada could see the pages clearly on her screen. "He claims it protects me from Beatrice and guarantees us $1 million to run away." Jada let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Flip to page 12, Gwen. Let us see what the rat is trying to pull." I flipped through the pages, holding them steady under the bright desk lamp. Jada read the complex legal clauses with terrifying speed. Her brilliant corporate legal mind dissected the trap in less than 2 minutes. "Do not put your name on that paper," she commanded, her voice hard and authoritative. "Trent thinks you are too stressed to read the fine print. Buried in Section 4 is a unilateral transfer of equity clause. By signing this, you are agreeing to transfer 100% ownership of your cybersecurity firm directly into his family trust. Section 7 completely waives your right to the marital home. The $1 million payout he promised is entirely contingent on the board of directors approving it. Beatrice controls the board. You will never see a single dime. If you sign this, Gwen, you will be legally homeless and bankrupt by tomorrow afternoon." I smiled a cold, dangerous smile. I reached into my desk drawer and bypassed my standard black ink pens. I pulled out a very specific custom-made fountain pen. I use it during corporate fraud seminars to demonstrate the dangers of physical document manipulation. The pen was filled with advanced disappearing ink. The chemical composition oxidizes and vanishes completely, leaving absolutely no trace or residue after 48 hours. "I'm going to give Trent exactly what he wants," I told Jada. I walked back downstairs holding the document. I forced tears into my eyes, letting them spill down my cheeks. I made my hands shake as I approached Trent in the living room. "You promise this keeps Beatrice away from Lily?" I asked, my voice breaking perfectly. I promise, Trent said, handing me the pen he had brought. No, I said, sniffing softly. I want to use my own pen. It makes me feel safer. I uncapped the disappearing ink pen and signed my name on the final page, executing a signature that deliberately lacked my usual legal flourishes. Trent snatched the document from the table the moment the ink dried. A look of pure, greedy victory flashed across his face. He had my business. He had my house. He thought he had won. I went to bed early, locking the bedroom door, but I did not sleep. I lay awake in the dark, waiting. Just after 2 in this morning, I heard a faint sound. It was not coming from the hallway. It was coming from Lily's room. I slipped out of bed, my heart hammering against my ribs. I crept silently down the carpeted hall. The door to my daughter's room was cracked open. A narrow beam of light spilled out onto the floor. I peered through the gap. Trent was standing by Lily's closet. He had a large black duffel bag open on the floor. He was frantically stuffing her small dresses, her shoes, and her favorite blankets into the bag. His movements were jagged and rushed. He was not waiting for the morning to destroy me. He was preparing to kidnap my daughter in the middle of the night. I pushed the bedroom door open and stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet. Trent jumped and spun around, dropping a handful of pink dresses onto the carpet. "What are you doing, Trent?" I asked. My voice was a low, steady whisper. I did not want to wake Lily, who was fast asleep in her bed, clutching the edge of her blanket. Trent recovered his shock quickly. He forced a tight, artificial smile. "I am just packing a few things for a weekend trip," he whispered back, moving toward the closet again. "My mother booked a surprise getaway for us at the lake house. I wanted to let you sleep since you have been so erratic lately. I am taking Lily up there tonight so she can wake up by the water." He reached into the closet, but I moved faster. I stepped directly between Trent and the wardrobe, blocking his path. I planted my feet firmly on the carpet. "You are not taking my daughter anywhere in the middle of the night," I said. "Gwen, move out of my way," Trent ordered. His polite facade began to crack. The charming husband mask melted away, revealing the desperate cornered man underneath. "We both signed the post-nuptial agreement tonight. We are legally separating our lives. I have every right to take my daughter on a vacation." I glanced quickly around the dark room. The brown teddy bear was sitting on top of Lily's dresser, facing us perfectly. The faint red glow of its hidden camera eye blinked in the shadows. It was recording every single second. It was capturing audio and video, routing it straight to the encrypted folder on Trent's laptop. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had to feed the recording. I had to give the microphone exactly what it needed to hear to put him in federal prison. I softened my posture. I made myself look small, terrified, and completely broken. I let my voice tremble just enough to sound like a desperate wife pleading with her powerful husband. "Trent, please do not do this," I begged, stepping back so the camera had a clear view of his aggressive stance. "You already took everything from me. You made me sign away my consulting firm. You made me give up the house. Why do you need to take Lily too? You and Colin already took $3 million. Trent crossed his arms over his chest. He looked down at me with absolute disgust. His ego was massive. He thought he had completely outsmarted me. He thought I was just a helpless foster kid who finally broke under the pressure of his wealthy family. "You signed the papers because you are crazy, Gwen," he sneered, stepping closer to me to use his physical size as intimidation. "You signed them because you know you would lose in court. My mother is going to bury you. You are going back to the gutter where we found you." I let out a fake sob, covering my face with my hands, but making sure the microphone could pick up every word. "I do not understand how you got that $3 million commercial loan." "Trent," I cried. "Jada and I never signed those bank guarantor documents. The bank requires spousal signatures to leverage our businesses. How did you get the money to buy that downtown penthouse for Vanessa?" Trent let out a loud, arrogant laugh. The sound was crisp and clear in the quiet bedroom. He was so incredibly proud of his own criminal genius. He could not resist the urge to brag to the woman he thought he had defeated. "You think a bank actually cares about your signature?" he mocked, gesturing wildly with his hands. "I am a vice president of a massive real estate empire. Colin is a trust manager. We traced your signature from an old tax return and forged it on the digital closing documents. We forged Jada's signature too. It took me 10 minutes on a PDF editor to secure $3 million in untraceable cash. You are a forensic accountant, and you did not even see it coming. I bought Vanessa that penthouse right under your nose, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. I kept my hands over my face for one more second. I needed to make sure he was completely finished confessing to multiple federal felonies on a hot microphone. When the silence settled over the room, I slowly lowered my hands. I stopped crying. The trembling in my shoulders vanished. I straightened my spine and looked Trent dead in the eye. My posture transformed from a cowering victim into an apex predator. Trent frowned, confused by my sudden shift in demeanor. I tilted my head toward the dresser. I pointed my finger directly at the brown teddy bear sitting in the shadows. In the state of Illinois, Trent, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, it is a felony to record someone in a private space without their consent. But federal wire fraud and forging banking signatures across state lines carry a maximum sentence of 30 years in federal prison. Trent slowly turned his head to look at the dresser. I smiled. I intercepted the local IP address for the nanny camera your mother put inside that bear, I told him. I know it routes directly to the Project Custody folder on your laptop. I know you have been using it to build a fake case against me, but right now it is recording raw, unedited audio, and you just confessed to federal bank fraud, forgery, and embezzling $3 million on a live feed. The realization hit him like a freight train. The arrogant sneer vanished from his face, replaced by sheer primal panic. His eyes darted from me to the blinking red light on the bear. He realized his own trap had just snapped shut around his neck. Trent lunged across the room. He grabbed the brown teddy bear off the dresser and threw it onto the hardwood floor. He raised his heavy boot and stomped down on the plastic face with brutal, violent force. The glass eye shattered into a dozen pieces. The red light flickered and died. He stomped on it again and again, tearing the fabric and crushing the internal circuit board until it was nothing but useless debris. He stood panting over the destroyed toy, his chest heaving. He glared at me, his face twisted into an expression of pure, violent hatred. He realized his grand plan to steal my business and my child had just been completely derailed. He snatched his car keys from the top of the dresser. He marched toward the bedroom door, but stopped right next to me, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. "You think you won?" He snarled, his breath hot against my cheek. "You think a broken camera is going to save you? You are a nobody, Gwen. I have the best lawyers in this city on retainer. I am going to the courthouse the second it opens. You will be served an ex parte emergency restraining order by noon today. I am telling the judge you are a violent threat to my daughter. You are dead to the courts. You will be thrown out of this house with nothing but the clothes on your back." He turned and stormed out of the room. I heard his heavy footsteps pounding down the stairs, followed by the loud slam of the front door. Seconds later, his tires screeched out of the driveway, echoing into the dark suburban night. I looked down at Lily, who had slept through the entire ordeal. I gently pulled the blanket up over her small shoulders. Trent thought he had the upper hand because he was racing to family court. He did not realize I had never planned on fighting him in family court. I was taking this directly to the federal government. I watched the digital clock on my bedroom nightstand tick closer to noon. I had barely slept. Every fiber of my being was on high alert. Trent had promised me an ex parte emergency restraining order by midday. In the state of Illinois, an ex parte order means a judge hears only one side of the story before making a ruling. Trent did not need me in the courtroom. He only needed his highly paid lawyers, his manufactured tears, and the false narrative that I was an imminent threat to my own child. At precisely 12 o'clock, heavy fists pounded on my front door. I walked downstairs, my steps slow and measured. Through the sidelight windows, I saw 3 uniformed police officers standing on my porch. Trent was standing right behind them, clutching a thick stack of legal documents. I opened the door and the cold Chicago wind swept into the foyer. "Are you Gwen, a tall officer?" asked, his hand resting cautiously on his duty belt. "I am," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly calm. The officer handed me a set of court papers. "You have been served with an emergency order of protection. You are legally required to vacate this premises immediately. You are barred from coming within 500 feet of your husband and your minor child. You have 10 minutes to pack a single bag of personal belongings." If you resist or refuse to comply, we will arrest you. Trent stepped out from behind the officers. He looked at me with an expression of pure, victorious malice. He had won the first round. He used his wealth and his family connections to weaponize the legal system against a woman who had grown up with absolutely nothing. He thought he was putting me right back where I started. I need to say goodbye to my daughter, I said, looking directly at the lead officer. Absolutely not. Trent interrupted, his voice cracking with fake panic. She is unstable, officer. The judge ordered zero contact. I cannot let her near Lily. She might do something drastic. The officer stepped between us, blocking my path to the stairs. You need to go pack your bag right now. I did not beg. I did not scream. I knew exactly how this game was played. If I raised my voice even a fraction of a decibel, it would be documented in the police report as erratic behavior, validating Trent's entire fabricated story. I turned around and walked upstairs with one of the officers following closely behind me. I pulled a small duffel bag from the closet and packed a few changes of clothes, my basic toiletries, and my encrypted backup hard drive. I did not take any jewelry or valuables. I only took what I needed to survive the next 48 hours. I walked back downstairs and headed straight for the front door. I did not look at Trent. I walked out into the freezing wind, climbed into my car, and drove away from the only real home I had ever known. I drove without a destination in mind for nearly an hour. The reality of the situation crashed over me in heavy, suffocating waves. I had been stripped of my house. I had been stripped of my business. But worst of all, I had been stripped of my little girl. I pulled into the parking lot of a cheap, run-down motel on the outskirts of the city. The neon sign buzzed and flickered in the gray afternoon light. I paid for a room in cash using bills I kept stashed in my glove compartment for emergencies. The room smelled of stale smoke and harsh cleaning chemicals. The floral bedspread was faded and the carpet was stained. It looked exactly like the temporary housing I used to sleep in when I was bouncing through the foster care system. Trent and Beatrice wanted me to feel utterly worthless. They wanted me sitting in a place exactly like this, feeling broken and defeated. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress and stared at the blank wall. For the first 10 minutes, I allowed myself to feel the profound, agonizing pain of being separated from Lily. I pictured her small face, wondering where her mother went. I pictured Trent spinning some toxic lie to explain my absence. The pain in my chest was so sharp it felt like shattered glass. But then the 10 minutes were up. The grieving mother stepped aside and the senior forensic accountant took the wheel. I opened my duffel bag and pulled out my encrypted hard drive. I set my laptop on the small scratched wooden desk in the corner of the motel room. Trent had successfully manipulated the family court system. He had used local judges and civil procedures to steal my life. Family court was a rigged game designed for people with deep pockets and no morals. I was not going to fight him there. I was going to change the entire battlefield. Suddenly, a loud, heavy knock rattled the flimsy motel door. I froze, closing my laptop instantly. I had not told anyone my location. I had turned off the location tracking on my phone the second I left my driveway. "Open the door, Gwen." The voice from the hallway was sharp, demanding, and completely unmistakable. I walked to the door and undid the chain lock. I pulled the door open. Jada stood in the doorway looking like an absolute force of destruction. She was wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal gray power suit, her dark hair styled immaculately. But it was the look in her eyes that sent a jolt of electricity straight down my spine. She looked lethal. Under her arm, she carried two massive, thick legal binders completely overflowing with highlighted documents and printed bank records. She did not wait for an invitation. She pushed past me and walked straight into the dingy motel room, dropping the heavy binders onto the small desk with a loud thud. "Jada, how did you find me?" I asked, locking the door behind her. "I am a corporate lawyer," Jada said, turning to face me. "I know how to track cash transactions, and I know your survival instincts. But that does not matter right now. Colin just tried to serve me with the same exact ex parte paperwork Trent used on you. He tried to lock me out of my own law firm. They coordinated the strike. They thought they could wipe us both off the map on the same afternoon." I looked at the massive binders on the desk. "What are those?" Jada slammed her hand flat against the top binder. She looked at me, her expression radiating pure, terrifying determination. "We are done playing defense," Gwenjada said, her voice vibrating with authority. "We are done playing by their rules in rigged local family courts. Family court judges do not understand cybersecurity, and they do not understand offshore money laundering. They just see a wealthy, weeping father and a supposedly crazy wife." She opened the top binder, revealing hundreds of pages of federal statutes, printed emails, and banking codes. "We are taking this to the feds." Jada continued, her eyes locking onto mine. "Forging bank signatures to secure a $3 million commercial loan crosses state lines. That is federal bank fraud. Routing that cash to a Delaware shell company to buy a penthouse for a mistress is federal wire fraud. And planting hidden audio devices in our homes without our consent violates federal wiretapping laws. Trent and Colin want a legal war. We are going to give them a federal indictment." I stared at my sister-in-law. The sheer brilliance of her legal strategy ignited a fire in my chest. We were not going to fight for custody in a local courthouse. We were going to put the entire family in federal prison. "What do we need?" I asked, pulling my chair up to the desk. Jada smiled, a cold, ruthless smile. "We need the master ledger. Beatrice keeps a physical flash drive in a wall safe in her mansion. It contains every single dirty transaction this family has made for the last 10 years. If we get that flash drive, we can trigger a federal racketeering investigation. We just need to break into her house." I parked my nondescript rental car 3 blocks away from Beatrice's gated community. The night air was bitterly cold, chilling my lungs as I zipped my dark jacket all the way up to my chin. I had spent the last 2 hours reviewing the blueprints of the estate with Jada back at the dingy motel. Tonight was the annual Pediatric Hospital Charity Gala. Trent, Colin, and Beatrice were absolutely required to be there, shaking hands with wealthy donors and posing for society photographers to maintain their flawless, aristocratic image. They thought I was sitting in a filthy room crying over my stolen daughter, broken and utterly defeated by their legal maneuvering. They had absolutely no idea I was standing at the edge of their manicured property line, armed with federal statutes and digital decryption tools. The wrought iron security gates towering at the entrance of the neighborhood were imposing, but I did not need to scale them. Weeks ago, long before the hidden cameras and the fake Child Protective Services call, I had quietly cloned the radio frequency identification data from Trent's phone during a routine backup. I held my digital cloner up to the pedestrian access panel hidden behind a brick pillar. The heavy iron gate clicked softly and swung open without a sound. I slipped into the compound. Beatrice's mansion loomed at the end of a long, sweeping driveway like a stone fortress. It was an ostentatious display of wealth, built on decades of fraud, manipulation, and cruelty. I walked briskly across the sprawling lawn, carefully avoiding the motion sensor floodlights Jada had mapped out for me using the community public utility records. I reached the side entrance near the catering kitchen. The security keypad glowed an angry red in the dark. If I entered the wrong code, the silent alarm would instantly dispatch private armed security and the local police. Trent would have his ultimate victory. I would be arrested for felony burglary, and he would use my conviction to permanently terminate my parental rights. I would never see Lily again. I took a slow, steadying breath and punched in the master override sequence I had extracted from Trent's encrypted password manager earlier that week. The light turned a welcoming green. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy, satisfying thunk. I stepped inside the lion's den and quietly pulled the door shut behind me. The interior of the mansion was dead quiet. The polished marble floors gleamed in the moonlight pouring through the massive arched windows. I moved silently up the grand sweeping staircase, heading directly toward the east wing of the house. Beatrice's private study was located at the very end of the hall, behind a set of heavy mahogany doors. I pushed them open and stepped into the room that served as the nerve center for their entire criminal enterprise. The space smelled of expensive leather-aged bourbon and stale perfume. I walked straight toward the massive oil painting of 3 thoroughbred horses hanging on the back wall. I reached behind the heavy gilded frame and pulled firmly. The painting swung outward on hidden oiled hinges. Behind it, embedded deep into the reinforced drywall, was a solid steel biometric and numeric wall safe. The keypad was slightly worn. I pulled a small ultraviolet flashlight from my pocket and swept the purple beam over the buttons. The numbers 1, 9, 7, and 8 glowed faintly with residual oil from her fingers. A standard thief would try birth dates, anniversaries, or banking pins. But I am a forensic accountant. I profile financial criminals for a living, and I knew Beatrice better than she knew herself. Beatrice was a textbook narcissist, deeply obsessed with her own high society origin story. She despised her current age and constantly lived in the glory of her youth. 1978 was the exact year she was crowned Queen of the Winter Debutante Ball. It was the moment she believed she peaked, the moment she cemented her status among the city elite. I punched in the 4 digits followed by the pound sign. A sharp mechanical click echoed through the quiet study. The heavy steel door popped open. Inside, sitting alone on a velvet tray, was a thick black encrypted flash drive. This was the master ledger. This was the physical manifestation of every single dirty offshore transfer, forged commercial loan, and illegal wiretap this family had executed over the last decade. I grabbed the heavy drive and dropped it immediately into my signal-blocking Faraday pouch. I had the smoking gun. Jada and I had enough hard evidence to trigger a massive federal racketeering investigation. We were going to put every single one of them in federal prison. I closed the safe and swung the horse painting back into its original place. I turned toward the heavy mahogany doors, ready to retrace my steps and make my escape into the cold night. Suddenly, the unmistakable aggressive crunch of tires on gravel shattered the silence outside. I froze in the center of the room. Brilliant, blinding white lights swept across the dark walls of the study. Headlights were panning across the front of the mansion. My burner phone vibrated frantically in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out. It was a message from Jada, who was monitoring their social media tags and local traffic cameras from the motel war room. They left the gala early. Get out now. I rushed to the window and peered down through a narrow gap in the heavy silk curtains. Beatrice's luxury sedan was parked haphazardly at the front entrance, the engine still running. The doors flew open. I heard the sharp, furious sound of Beatrice's voice echoing up from the driveway. She was not alone. Someone was sobbing loudly, a wet, hysterical sound that cut through the cold air. It was Vanessa. Trent's 24-year-old mistress had completely crashed the elite pediatric charity gala and caused a massive public scene. Beatrice had dragged her back to the mansion to silence her and protect the family image from imploding in front of their wealthy donors. The heavy front doors of the mansion slammed open downstairs. The sound rattled the windows. I heard the sharp clicking of Beatrice's designer heels striking the marble floor in the foyer, followed by Trent's panicked, hushed apologies and Vanessa's continued wailing. They were walking directly toward the grand staircase. I stepped away from the window, my heart hammering furiously against my ribs. I was trapped on the second floor of a highly secure mansion carrying a stolen flash drive containing millions of dollars in federal fraud evidence. And the architects of my destruction were marching right up the stairs, blocking my only way out. The heavy mahogany doors of the study vibrated as the footsteps grew louder on the grand staircase. I had less than 10 seconds. I scanned the dim room. The windows were too exposed. The heavy oak coat closet in the corner was my only option. I darted across the Persian rug, slipped inside the closet, and pulled the louvered wooden doors shut just a fraction of a second before the study doors burst open. I pressed myself flat against the back panel, burying my face into the heavy wool of Beatrice's winter coats. The smell of dry cleaning chemicals and cedar filled my lungs. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, keeping my breath slow and shallow. Beatrice marched into the room, her designer heels striking the hardwood floor like a gavel. Trent followed immediately behind her, dragging a sobbing Vanessa by the arm. "Shut the door, Trent." Beatrice snapped, her voice practically vibrating with rage. "Lock it. We are not doing this where the staff can hear." The heavy deadbolt clicked into place. I was locked inside the room with the 3 people actively trying to destroy my life. Vanessa was crying hysterically, gasping for air between loud, jagged sobs. "You promised me she would be gone," Vanessa wailed. "You promised me Gwen would be locked up today. Why is she just sitting in a motel? I want to go to my penthouse." I carefully reached into my dark jacket pocket and pulled out my burner phone. I switched the device to silent mode and tapped the audio recording application. The red recording indicator lit up the dark fabric of my pocket. I pointed the microphone directly toward the slats in the closet door. Trent tried to keep his voice low and soothing. Vanessa, please calm down. The police served Gwen the emergency order today. She is out of the house. I just need the judge to approve the 48-hour mandatory psychiatric hold on Monday morning. Everything is going exactly according to plan. Do not ruin this for us by throwing a tantrum at a public charity event. Vanessa was not having it. She screamed, swatting Trent's hands away. You lied to me. Your mother lied to me. You said I could move into the penthouse this weekend, but the building manager said the wire transfer flagged a security hold. I am not a secret anymore. I want my house. Beatrice let out a sound of pure, unadulterated disgust. She slammed her expensive purse onto the mahogany desk. I bought you that condo with the forged loan money, you insolent little brat, Beatrice yelled, losing completely her refined society facade. The acoustic quality of the room captured her shrill, vicious tone perfectly on my phone. I fronted the $3 million through my shell company so my husband and my son could be happy. I risked my own family trust to fund your luxury lifestyle. You will keep your mouth shut until Trent officially commits his wife to the psychiatric ward. The audio recording picked up every single damning syllable: the admission of the forged loan money, the confirmation of the shell company, the premeditated conspiracy to falsely imprison me in a mental health facility. It was all right there, captured in high-definition audio. Trent chimed in, his voice thick with arrogant annoyance. My mother is right, Vanessa. We committed federal bank fraud to get you that property. We forged Gwen's signature and Jada's signature to leverage their businesses. If you make a scene right now, you put all of us at risk of a federal investigation. Just go into the guest bathroom, fix your smeared makeup, and stop acting like a child. We will have Gwen locked in a padded cell by Monday. Then the money will clear completely. I stood frozen in the dark closet, my thumb resting securely over the save button on my phone. They had just handed me the key to their own prison cells. I had the master ledger in my Faraday pouch, and I had their verbal confessions recorded. I had won, but I still needed to get out of the house alive. Vanessa let out a loud, dramatic huff, her heels clicking across the room as she marched into the adjoining bathroom and slammed the door. A tense silence settled over the study. Trent sighed heavily. I need a drink, he muttered, walking toward the crystal decanters on the far side of the room. Get me one too, Beatrice ordered, her voice laced with exhaustion. I need to take off this heavy coat. My blood ran completely cold. The sharp, rhythmic clicking of Beatrice's heels moved directly toward the oak closet. She was walking straight toward me. My heart hammered against my ribs with such violent force I was certain she could hear it. I gripped the heavy metal edge of the flash drive in my pocket. If she opened the door, I would have to fight my way out. I braced my legs, preparing to shove the doors open and knock her backward. Her shadow fell across the narrow slats of the closet door. The brass doorknob jiggled. The wood creaked loudly as she began to pull the heavy door open. Suddenly, a loud, obnoxious ringtone shattered the silence in the study. Beatrice froze, her hand still resting on the closet doorknob. The ringing came from the desk behind her. She let out a sharp, irritated groan and released the handle. She walked away from the closet, her footsteps retreating toward the desk. Who on earth is calling me at this hour? Beatrice snapped, picking up her phone. Trent poured liquor into a glass. Who is it? Beatrice stared at the screen. It is Colin's soon-to-be ex-wife. It is Jada. Why is she calling me? Trent scoffed. Answer it. See what she knows. She is probably crying about Colin taking her law firm shares. Do not give her an inch. Beatrice swiped the screen and answered the call, instantly switching back to her cold, aristocratic tone. Jada, it is incredibly late. What could you possibly want? As Beatrice focused all her attention on yelling at Jada, and Trent stood with his back turned, pouring a second drink, I knew this was my only window. Jada was executing a flawless, perfectly timed diversion from the motel war room. I gently pushed the louvered closet door open, just enough to slip through. I moved with absolute silence across the thick Persian rug, staying deep in the shadows behind the large leather sofas. I reached the heavy velvet curtains covering the side window. Beatrice was pacing near the desk, shouting into her phone. I do not care about your legal threats, Jada. Colin is taking everything. You are just as crazy as Gwen. I slipped behind the heavy fabric of the curtain. I quickly and silently unlatched the brass window lock. I pushed the heavy glass pane up, welcoming the freezing night wind that rushed into my face. I swung my legs over the sill, dropping quietly onto the flat roof of the first-floor patio. I pulled the window shut behind me, leaving it slightly ajar. I scrambled down the decorative stone trellis, dropping onto the soft grass below. I sprinted across the dark lawn, disappearing into the cold, silent night, carrying the absolute destruction of their entire empire in my pocket. The freezing wind burned my lungs as I sprinted across the dark expanse of the neighboring golf course. I did not stop running until I reached the secluded side street where I had parked my rental car. My hands were shaking so violently from the adrenaline that I could barely insert the key into the ignition. I threw the car into drive and sped away from the gated community, leaving the chaos of Beatrice and her collapsing empire in my rearview mirror. 20 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of the dingy roadside motel. Jada threw the door open before I even had the chance to knock. She pulled me inside and quickly slid the heavy chain lock back into place. "Tell me you got it," Jada demanded, her dark eyes wide with anticipation. I did not say a word. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out the signal-blocking Faraday pouch, and dumped the heavy black flash drive directly onto the center of the scratched wooden desk. Jada let out a sharp breath. The corporate lawyer in her knew exactly what that small piece of plastic represented. It was the physical manifestation of total, absolute victory. "Let us see what Beatrice is hiding," I said, pulling my chair up to the laptop. I plugged the drive into my isolated offline machine. A dark terminal window immediately popped up on the screen, demanding a complex decryption key. Beatrice had used enterprise-grade security software to lock the drive. She paid top dollar to ensure no standard investigator could ever access her files. But I was not a standard investigator. I spent my entire career breaking apart financial firewalls for corporate audits. I launched a heavy brute force decryption algorithm I had custom-built for moments exactly like this. The fan on my laptop whirred loudly as the processor maxed out, hammering the encryption wall with thousands of targeted mathematical strikes per second. Jada paced behind me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. "We need that ledger, Gwen," Jada said, her voice tight with tension. "Colin just texted me. He is officially trying to lock me out of the firm accounts on Monday morning. They are accelerating their timeline. They want us both destitute before the weekend is over. They are going to be in federal custody before lunch," I replied, keeping my eyes locked on the screen. The terminal window flashed green. The security wall shattered. The drive opened. A single massive spreadsheet populated my screen. It contained thousands of highly organized rows of financial data spanning back over a decade. I immediately ran a search query for the $3 million commercial loan. The transaction popped up instantly. It showed the exact routing numbers, moving the cash from the bank straight into the Delaware shell company registered to Vanessa. "We have it," I breathed out, pointing to the screen. "The forged loan is right there. It proves Trent and Colin committed bank fraud to buy that penthouse. This alone is 20 years in federal prison." Jada leaned over my shoulder, her eyes scanning the massive columns of incoming and outgoing cash flows. She frowned, leaning closer to the glowing screen. Her brilliant legal mind was processing the raw data at lightning speed. "Gwen, scroll up," Jada instructed, her tone turning razor sharp. "Scroll up to the deposits from last year. Look at those origin routing numbers." I scrolled up several pages. There were dozens of massive cash deposits funneling into Beatrice's private Cayman Island accounts. The numbers were staggering. $50,000 here, $100,000 there. They were all coming from the same domestic tax identification number. I ran a quick background search on the tax identification number. The result made my blood turn to absolute ice. "The money is coming from the Elite Pediatric Hospital Foundation," I whispered, staring at the search result in sheer disbelief. "The same charity gala they attended tonight." Jada let out a loud, humorless laugh. "Oh my God," she said, covering her mouth with her hand. "Beatrice is not just helping her sons hide money from their wives. She is running a massive embezzlement ring. She is the president of that charity board. She has been skimming 30% off the top of every single donation for the last 12 years. She is stealing millions of dollars directly from sick children and her billionaire country club friends. The magnitude of the discovery was earth-shattering. Beatrice was the ultimate high society predator. She sat at tables with the wealthiest, most powerful people in Chicago, judging their clothes and their manners, while actively siphoning their charitable donations into her own offshore accounts to fund her lavish lifestyle. "This is not just family court anymore," Jada said, her voice ringing with lethal authority. "This is a massive federal RICO case. When those country club billionaires find out Beatrice stole their charity money, they will personally fund her prosecution. They will sue her into absolute oblivion. She will not have a single cent left to her name." I cracked my knuckles, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Let us make sure she cannot buy her way out of this. We are going to burn her empire to the ground publicly and permanently. I opened a secure encrypted email server. I attached the complete decrypted master ledger. I attached the audio recording of Trent and Beatrice confessing to the forgery in the closet. I attached the bank routing numbers proving the purchase of the penthouse for Vanessa. "Who are we sending this to?" Jada asked, standing right beside me. "Everyone," I replied. I typed in the direct reporting email addresses for the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Unit. I added the email for the Chicago Division of the FBI White Collar Crime Task Force. And finally, I added the news desks of every major local television station in the city. I did not hit send. Instead, I wrote a delayed execution script. I set the automated timer on the email blast. "Tomorrow morning at 9, Trent is dragging me into family court to finalize his fake emergency order," I told Jada. "He is going to stand in front of a judge, play his fake deepfake videos, and try to steal Lily from me." I set the digital timer for exactly 10 o'clock in the morning. When the clock strikes 10, the judge will be asking me for my defense. I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And at that exact second, this entire package will hit the inbox of every federal agent and news reporter in the state. Jada smiled a cold, ruthless smile. The trap was perfectly set. There was absolutely no way out. The heavy wooden doors of the family court building felt like the gates of a prison. I walked into courtroom 402 at exactly 9 in the morning. I was entirely alone. I wore a simple conservative gray suit. I kept my posture small, my shoulders slightly hunched, playing the exact role of the terrified, helpless mother they all expected to see. Trent was already seated at the plaintiff's table. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit, looking every bit the wealthy, concerned father. Sitting next to him was his attorney, a high-priced, ruthless man named Mr. Montgomery, who charged $1,000 an hour to destroy families. I glanced back at the wooden gallery benches. Beatrice was sitting in the front row. She wore a pristine white dress, perfectly styled hair, and a pearl necklace. She looked at me and offered a slow, venomous smirk. She thought she had already won. She thought I was walking into a slaughterhouse. Colin sat next to her, looking completely bored, checking his expensive watch. They thought Jada was at home crying over her own divorce papers. Judge Patterson entered the room and struck his gavel. He was an older, stern man, known for having absolutely zero tolerance for domestic disturbances. He looked down at his paperwork and then glared directly at me. Mr. Montgomery stood up, smoothing his silk tie. "Your Honor, we are here today to formalize the emergency order of protection against the defendant. My client Trent is a devoted father who has been living in absolute terror. His wife has suffered a severe mental break. She is violent, erratic, and poses an immediate physical threat to their 6-year-old daughter Lily. We are petitioning the court for full sole legal and physical custody to be awarded to the father effective immediately." I kept my head bowed, staring at my hands resting on the defense table. "We have secured disturbing video evidence of the defendant's behavior inside the marital home." Mr. Montgomery continued, his voice echoing loudly across the silent courtroom. "My client was forced to install these cameras to protect his child after the defendant's violent outbursts began escalating. With the court's permission, I would like to play Exhibit A." Judge Patterson nodded. "Proceed, counselor." A large flat-screen monitor was rolled to the center of the room. Trent covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking as if he was sobbing. Beatrice let out a loud theatrical gasp from the gallery, clutching her pearls. The screen flickered to life. The high-definition footage filled the room. It was the heavily manipulated video Trent had manufactured using the hidden camera in the teddy bear. The artificial intelligence deepfake was terrifyingly flawless. The video showed me screaming at the top of my lungs, my face contorted in a mask of pure rage. It showed me grabbing Lily roughly by the arm and throwing a ceramic plate against the kitchen wall where it shattered into 100 pieces. The audio was distorted, making my voice sound demonic and slurred. The courtroom was dead silent except for the horrifying sounds of the fake video. I watched myself commit acts of child abuse that had never actually happened. The digital manipulation was so precise that anyone watching would believe I was an absolute monster. Judge Patterson watched the screen, his face turning bright red with disgust. He slammed his hand down on the bench. "Turn that off," he barked. "I have seen enough." Mr. Montgomery paused the video, looking deeply satisfied. "Your Honor, as you can clearly see, the defendant is a severe danger. We request that her parental rights be stripped immediately and she be permanently barred from the family estate." The judge leaned forward, glaring down at me with absolute contempt. The trap was perfectly executed. Trent had manipulated the entire legal system using his wealth and his fabricated digital evidence. "Ma'am," the judge said, his voice ringing with harsh authority, "I have rarely seen such disturbing footage in my courtroom. Based on this emergency evidence, I am prepared to grant the plaintiff's motion in full. I am going to award sole custody to your husband. Do you have legal representation today? Do you have anything to say in your defense before I finalize this ruling?" I looked up at the large analog clock on the courtroom wall. It was exactly 45 minutes past 9. The automated script sitting on the motel server was quietly counting down to 10 o'clock. I slowly stood up from my chair. I did not look scared anymore. I straightened my spine and lifted my chin, making direct eye contact with the judge. "Your Honor," I said, my voice perfectly clear and steady, "I do have legal representation. She is arriving right now." Right on cue, the heavy oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung open with a loud, echoing crash. Every head in the room turned. Beatrice stopped smirking. Colin dropped his phone. Trent froze, his fake tears instantly vanishing. Jada marched down the center aisle of the courtroom. She was wearing a razor-sharp crimson power suit, her dark hair pulled back into a sleek, aggressive bun. She carried a massive black leather briefcase. Her heels struck the polished floor like a drumbeat of absolute doom. She bypassed the gallery, ignoring the shocked, terrified expressions of her mother-in-law and her husband. She walked straight through the wooden swinging gate and took her place right beside me at the defense table. "I am representing the defendant, Your Honor," Jada announced, her powerful voice commanding the entire room. "I am submitting my formal appearance as lead counsel for Gwen." Mr. Montgomery scoffed, looking annoyed. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Opposing counsel is walking in at the last possible second. The evidence of abuse has already been presented, and the court is ready to rule. This woman is a corporate attorney, not a family lawyer." Jada did not even look at the opposing lawyer. She kept her eyes locked entirely on the judge. "We apologize for the dramatic entrance, Your Honor," Jada said smoothly, opening her heavy briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of certified documents. "But we are not here to argue a standard family custody dispute. We are here to dismantle a massive criminal conspiracy." Trent jumped up from his chair. "This is insane," he shouted, his panic finally breaking through his polished exterior. "She is lying. They are both crazy." "Sit down," Mr. Montgomery hissed, pulling Trent back into his seat. Judge Patterson frowned, leaning forward over the bench. "Counsel, you just made a very serious accusation. You are telling me the video evidence I just watched is part of a conspiracy." "That video is a heavily manipulated digital forgery, Your Honor," Jada stated, her tone ringing with absolute lethal confidence. "My client was recorded in her private bathroom and bedroom without her consent, which is a state felony. The audio and visual files were then processed through an artificial intelligence generation program to manufacture a completely false narrative of child abuse." Mr. Montgomery laughed out loud. "That is a desperate science fiction defense, Your Honor. They have absolutely no proof of digital manipulation." Jada smiled, a cold, ruthless smile that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "We have absolute proof," Jada countered, turning to face the courtroom doors. "Your Honor, The defense calls our first witness to the stand. We call Special Agent Thorne from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Cyber Forensics Division. The courtroom doors opened again. A tall man in a dark suit flashed his federal badge and walked down the aisle. Beatrice gripped the edge of her wooden bench, her knuckles turning completely white. The trap had just sprung. Special Agent Thorne took the stand with the kind of absolute, undeniable authority that made the entire courtroom freeze. He stated his credentials for the official record, detailing his 15 years of experience, analyzing digital forgeries, prosecuting cybercrimes, and dismantling electronic surveillance networks. Jada did not waste a single second. She paced confidently toward the witness box, her tailored crimson suit commanding the room. She handed him the tablet containing the video file Trent had just presented to the judge. Agent Thorne. Jada began, her voice carrying sharply and clearly across the silent room. Have you analyzed the structural metadata and foundational code of this specific video file submitted by the plaintiff? I have, Agent Thorne replied, speaking directly to Judge Patterson with professional detachment. This file is a textbook digital forgery. Our forensic analysis team processed the raw data overnight and revealed 3 distinct layers of aggressive manipulation. The audio track was generated using advanced artificial intelligence voice cloning software. The vocal cadences do not match normal human breathing patterns. Furthermore, the base video was captured using a hidden Internet Protocol camera illegally concealed inside a child's toy. We traced the compilation data and the transmission routing directly back to an encrypted laptop registered to the plaintiff. The courtroom erupted into a chaotic, shocked murmur. Judge Patterson slammed his heavy wooden gavel, demanding immediate silence. His face had turned a deep, dangerous shade of purple. He despised anyone who tried to manipulate the justice system, but he especially loathed people who tried to use his courtroom to destroy innocent mothers. He turned his furious, burning gaze directly onto Trent. Trent was practically shrinking into his expensive custom suit. He looked frantically back at the gallery. Beatrice was sitting rigidly on the hard wooden bench, staring at the floor. The arrogant smirk she had worn just 10 minutes ago was entirely wiped from her face. Colin looked like he was about to be physically sick right there in the front row. Jada pivoted smoothly, her heels striking the floor like a steady drumbeat as she walked toward the plaintiff's table. She looked Trent dead in the eye, her expression radiating lethal corporate power. I call the plaintiff to the stand, she demanded. Trent stood up, his legs shaking visibly beneath the table. He walked to the witness box and swore to tell the truth. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The wealthy, untouchable real estate executive was crumbling under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom. Mr. Trent, Jada began, crossing her arms over her chest. Did you or did you not conceal a live feed recording device inside a teddy bear and place it in my client's home without her explicit consent? Trent stammered violently, wiping his forehead with a shaking hand. I was just trying to protect my daughter. I was worried about her safety. I had a right to know what was happening in my own house. Jada slammed her hand flat against the wooden railing of the witness box, making Trent jump backward. Do not lie to this court, she warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. You did not want to protect anyone. You manufactured a fake video to strip a mother of her child so you could steal her assets and fund your secret mistress in a divorce, and you thought you could use a federal offense to do your dirty work. Mr. Montgomery stood up quickly, trying to salvage the rapidly sinking ship. Objection. Your Honor, he stammered. Opposing counsel is badgering the witness and introducing baseless accusations about mistresses and stolen assets. Judge Patterson held up his hand, stopping the highly paid lawyer instantly. Overruled, the judge growled, leaning aggressively over the bench. I want to hear his answer to these allegations. Sit down, counselor. I did not do anything wrong, Trent choked out, looking desperately at his mother in the gallery. Mom, tell them we were just trying to help Lily. Tell them it was your idea. Beatrice looked away, her jaw clenched incredibly tight. She was completely abandoning her favorite son to save herself from the federal crosshairs. She refused to make eye contact with him. You claim you did nothing wrong? Jada asked, a cruel, highly satisfied smile spreading across her face. Then let us talk about your other desperate attempts to secure your wealth at my client's expense. Your Honor. The defense submits Exhibit B into evidence. It is a raw, unedited audio recording captured just 2 nights ago, directly from the illegal surveillance device the plaintiff himself installed. Jada connected her secure mobile device to the courtroom audio system. She hit play. The pristine audio of Trent's voice echoed through the massive silent courtroom. The acoustics amplified every single word of his arrogant, toxic confession from the dark closet. "You think a bank actually cares about your signature?" His recorded voice mocked, dripping with egotistical pride. "I am a vice president of a massive real estate empire. Colin is a trust manager. We traced your signature from an old tax return and forged it on the digital closing documents. We forged Jada's signature too. It took me 10 minutes on a PDF editor to secure $3 million in untraceable cash. I bought Vanessa that penthouse right under your nose." The recording stopped. The silence that followed was absolute and suffocating. Colin let out a loud, panicked gasp from the gallery. He realized Trent had just implicated him in federal bank fraud in front of an active FBI agent and a sitting judge. Colin stood up, knocking his knees against the wooden bench, looking around wildly for an exit. "Mr. Montgomery." Trent's high-priced lawyer jumped up from his chair as if the seat was on fire. His face was completely chalk white. Submitting fabricated digital evidence to a judge and actively representing a client who just confessed to federal bank fraud meant his own prestigious law license was instantly on the line. He wanted absolutely nothing to do with this sinking ship. "Your Honor," Mr. Montgomery stammered hastily, packing his thick leather briefcase with shaking hands. "I was completely unaware of these fraudulent criminal actions. I cannot ethically continue this representation. I formally request to withdraw as counsel for the plaintiff immediately." He did not even wait for the judge to officially rule on his request. Mr. Montgomery turned his back on Trent and practically ran out of the courtroom, leaving his wealthy client completely defenseless and utterly exposed to the legal slaughter. Trent sat alone in the witness box, shaking uncontrollably. He looked across the room at me, his eyes wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. He finally realized I had not just beaten him in family court. I had completely decimated his entire existence. I maintained my perfect calm posture and gave him a slow, chilling smile. I glanced up at the large analog clock hanging on the oak-paneled wall above the judge. The thick black hand clicked forward with a heavy mechanical thud. It was exactly 9:55 in the morning. We were exactly 5 minutes away from the automated script launching the master ledger to the entire federal government and every news station in the city. The final deadly blow was already in motion, and absolutely nothing could stop it. The heavy wooden doors of the courtroom swung shut behind Mr. Montgomery, sealing Trent entirely alone at the plaintiff's table. He had no lawyer, no defense, and no escape. The wealthy, untouchable real estate executive looked like a cornered animal under the harsh fluorescent lights. Jada did not give him a single second to breathe. She did not let the courtroom recover from the shock of the cyber expert's testimony. She pivoted sharply on her heels, her crimson power suit blazing against the drab wooden interior of the courthouse. She walked back to the defense table and pulled a massive bound stack of financial documents from her briefcase. "Your Honor," Jada announced, her voice echoing with lethal corporate authority. The manufactured video was simply the weapon the plaintiff used to distract this court. Now the defense submits Exhibit C into evidence to establish the true financial motive behind this fraudulent emergency order. Judge Patterson leaned forward, his face still flushed with righteous anger over the deepfake video. He accepted the thick stack of papers from the bailiff. "Proceed, counselor." The judge ordered, his eyes locked on Trent. Jada walked to the center of the room. 2 days ago, Trent and his brother Colin executed a commercial bank loan for $3 million against the primary family trust. To secure this massive amount of liquid cash, they required the signatures of their spouses, my client Gwen and myself. Jada pointed a perfectly manicured finger directly at Trent. "Neither I nor my client signed those documents. The plaintiff forged our signatures across state lines to secure funds from a federally insured institution. He then immediately wired that stolen money through 2 domestic intermediary accounts and parked it in a Delaware shell company." Trent gripped the edge of his table. His knuckles were bone white. "You cannot prove any of that," he choked out, his voice cracking with sheer panic. Jada smiled a cold, ruthless smile. She was a brilliant African-American corporate attorney who had spent her entire career destroying hostile takeovers, and she was currently dismantling her own corrupt family with absolute precision. "We do not need to prove it," Mr. Trent Jada countered smoothly. You already confessed to it on the audio recording we submitted 10 minutes ago. But the paper trail is even more damning. Jada turned to address the judge. Your Honor, my client is a senior forensic accountant. She traced the routing numbers. The $3 million was used to purchase a luxury downtown penthouse for a 24-year-old woman named Vanessa. Vanessa is the personal assistant to Beatrice, the plaintiff's mother. The plaintiff committed federal bank fraud and wire fraud to purchase a secret property for his mistress, and he intended to use this court to throw his wife into a psychiatric ward before she could notice the missing assets. The gallery erupted into shocked gasps. Judge Patterson flipped rapidly through the financial documents, his eyes scanning the highlighted routing numbers and property deeds. The evidence was pristine, undeniable, and utterly devastating. But Jada was not finished. She turned her dark, piercing gaze away from Trent and looked directly at the gallery. She locked eyes with her husband Colin, who was sitting in the front row next to Beatrice. Colin had been slouching arrogantly just 30 minutes ago. Now he sat frozen, staring at Jada with growing horror. There is one more crucial detail in these wire transfers, Your Honor. Jada said, her voice dropping to a dangerous carrying pitch. Trent did not act alone, but he certainly did not share the liability equally. To move the money to the Cayman Islands in Delaware, Trent required an executive trust manager to authorize the offshore routing. He used his brother Colin's credentials. Colin blinked, shaking his head slightly in the gallery. However, Jada continued, her eyes never leaving Colin. The metadata on the digital authorization shows the transfer was executed from Trent's mobile device IP address. Trent and Beatrice deliberately structured the offshore wire fraud to name Colin as the primary guarantor of the illegal shell company. When the federal authorities investigate this stolen $3 million, Colin is the one legally positioned to take the absolute full fall for the felony. Trent and Beatrice set Colin up to go to federal prison so Trent could keep his mistress. The air in the courtroom instantly vanished. Colin processed the legal terminology with terrifying speed. The realization hit his arrogant, foolish brain like a runaway freight train. His own mother and brother had stolen his identity, leveraged his personal trust assets, and framed him for federal wire fraud to protect Trent's affair. A guttural, furious roar ripped from Colin's throat. He lunged out of the wooden gallery bench with violent force. He did not care about the judge. He did not care about the armed bailiffs. Colin vaulted over the low wooden partition separating the gallery from the court floor and tackled Trent directly out of his chair. The heavy wooden plaintiff's table crashed to the floor. The two brothers hit the ground in a chaotic, vicious tangle of expensive suits and pure, unadulterated hatred. Colin threw a brutal punch that cracked sharply against Trent's jaw. You set me up! Colin screamed, his face purple with rage, his hands gripping Trent's throat. You stole my name! I am going to prison for your garbage, mistress! Trent thrashed wildly, kicking his legs and clawing at Colin's face. Get off me! You knew we were taking the money! Trent shrieked back, blood pooling at the corner of his mouth. Beatrice shrieked in absolute horror from the gallery. She scrambled over the partition, her pristine white dress tearing as she threw herself into the brawl. Stop it. Both of you stop it, Beatrice wailed, grabbing Colin's hair and pulling violently to get him off her favorite son. You are ruining the family. Colin shoved his mother backward. You ruined the family. You framed me for his mistakes. The pristine aristocratic facade of the wealthy dynasty completely shattered into a screaming, backstabbing brawl right on the courtroom floor. They were tearing each other to pieces like feral animals. Judge Patterson slammed his gavel repeatedly, his voice booming over the chaos. Bailiffs. Restrain them immediately. I want all three of them in handcuffs right now. 3 armed bailiffs rushed into the fray, pulling the screaming, bleeding family members apart and shoving them face first against the polished wooden benches. Handcuffs clicked sharply as they were detained. I stood perfectly still at the defense table. I did not flinch. I did not move. I just watched them burn their own empire to the ground. I glanced up at the large analog clock on the courtroom wall. The thick black hand ticked forward with a heavy mechanical thud. 9:58, 9:59, 10 o'clock. The exact second the minute hand struck the 12, a sharp synchronized electronic chime rang out through the massive room. Jada's phone chimed on the defense table. Trent's phone buzzed wildly from the floor where it had fallen. Beatrice's purse, sitting abandoned on the gallery bench, began to vibrate endlessly with incoming notification alerts. Even Judge Patterson's private computer terminal on the high bench chimed with an urgent incoming email notification. The automated script sitting on the dark server in the motel room had just executed perfectly. The master ledger detailing a decade of offshore embezzlement, federal bank fraud, and stolen charity funds had officially landed in the inbox of the IRS, the FBI White-Collar Crime Division, and every major news station in Chicago. The digital guillotine had just dropped. The sharp electronic chimes continued to echo through the grand courtroom. It was a chaotic symphony of notifications ringing from every pocket, briefcase, and purse in the room. I stood beside Jada at the defense table, my posture perfectly straight, my hands resting lightly on the polished wood. We did not check our phones. We already knew exactly what the message said. In the gallery, Beatrice fumbled with the clasp of her designer handbag. Her hands were shaking violently as she pulled out her phone. She swiped the screen with a manicured finger. I watched her eyes dart back and forth as she read the subject line of the email blast. Her mouth fell open. The blood completely drained from her face, leaving her looking like a hollow, terrified ghost. The master ledger was out. Every single stolen charity dollar, every offshore transfer to the Cayman Islands, every manipulated country club donation spanning over a decade was now sitting in the inboxes of the federal government and the local news stations. The absolute worst fear of a high society narcissist had just come true. Her pristine public image was permanently annihilated. Beatrice let out a strangled, breathless gasp. Her phone slipped from her trembling fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp plastic crack, skidding under the heavy wooden bench. She did not even try to pick it up. She just stared at the empty space in front of her, her chest heaving with sheer, unadulterated panic. Judge Patterson was staring down at his own screen. The furious red color on his face deepened into a dangerous storm cloud gray. He looked up from his device and locked eyes with Special Agent Thorne, who was still standing near the witness box. The federal agent gave the judge a single sharp nod of confirmation. The data packet they had just received was the real deal. It was the physical proof required to launch a massive federal raid. Trent was still standing in the witness box. He did not have his phone. He looked around the courtroom, completely baffled by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The arrogant real estate executive had no idea that the ground beneath his feet had just collapsed into a bottomless sinkhole. "Mom," Trent called out, his voice cracking with desperate confusion. "Mom, what is going on? What does the email say? Tell Mr. Montgomery to come back inside. We need to stop them." Beatrice ignored him. She did not look at her favorite son. She was entirely consumed by the realization that she was going to spend the rest of her life in a federal penitentiary. The elite billionaires she had been stealing from for 12 years were probably reading the exact same email right now over their morning coffee. They were going to sue her into absolute poverty before the criminal trials even began. Colin, sitting a few feet away from his mother, was staring at his own screen. The foolish, easily manipulated brother looked up, his face twisted in pure horror. He finally understood the scope of the criminal enterprise his mother had been running. "You stole from sick children!" Colin yelled, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. He pointed a shaking finger at Beatrice. "You embezzled from the Pediatric Foundation. You used my name on the bank loans to cover up your offshore money laundering. You set us all up to take the fall." Before Beatrice could scream back at him, a loud, booming crash shattered the chaos of the room. The heavy reinforced oak doors at the back of the courtroom swung violently open. They hit the interior walls with a deafening bang. A coordinated team of federal agents marched through the doorway. They moved with terrifying, lethal precision. Leading the pack were 3 agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, wearing dark suits and tactical vests. Right behind them were 2 specialized agents from the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. Their heavy boots struck the polished floor in perfect unison, a steady, aggressive march of absolute federal authority. Judge Patterson did not bang his gavel. He sat back in his high leather chair and folded his hands, granting the federal government total control of his courtroom. Trent gripped the wooden railing of the witness box. His knuckles turned white. He looked at the armed agents marching down the center aisle and let out a high, terrified whimper. The wealthy bully who had tried to throw me into a psychiatric ward to steal my daughter was currently shaking so hard his knees knocked against the wood. Agent Thorne stepped out of the witness area and joined his colleagues at the front of the room. He pointed directly at Trent. Trenton, you are under arrest for felony wire fraud, bank fraud, and the illegal interception of electronic communications. A federal agent barked, his voice carrying the full weight of the United States government. Two agents moved in instantly. They grabbed Trent by his expensive suit jacket, hauling him roughly out of the witness box. Trent screamed, thrashing his arms wildly. "You cannot do this!" Trent sobbed, tears of pure terror streaming down his face. "I am a vice president. I have money. Mom, do something. Call the mayor. Call the lawyers." An agent slammed Trent face first onto the plaintiff table. The heavy metallic click of steel handcuffs echoed sharply through the room. Trent was completely immobilized, his face pressed against the very table where he had planned to steal my entire life just 30 minutes ago. Beatrice watched her golden child get shackled like a common criminal. The reality of the federal raid finally broke through her shock. The arrogant matriarch, who had spent a decade treating me like dirt because of my foster care background, suddenly realized she was about to be locked in a concrete cell. Survival instinct took over. Beatrice scrambled out of the wooden pew. She shoved Colin out of her way, nearly knocking him to the floor. She kicked off her expensive designer heels and made a desperate, pathetic dash for the side exit of the gallery. She actually thought she could outrun the FBI in a pencil skirt. "Stop right there!" an agent yelled, sprinting directly after her. Beatrice lunged for the brass handle of the side door. She did not even make it halfway. A female FBI agent closed the distance in 3 massive strides. She tackled Beatrice from behind. The impact sent the wealthy socialite crashing hard onto the polished courtroom floor. Beatrice screamed in shock and pain as her pristine white dress dragged across the dirty wood. Her pearl necklace snapped, sending dozens of expensive white beads scattering wildly across the room. "Get off me!" Beatrice shrieked, kicking her legs and flailing like a trapped animal. "Do you know who I am? I sit on the hospital board. I will have your badge for this." The agent did not hesitate. She pressed her knee firmly into the center of Beatrice's back, pinning the screaming woman flat against the ground. She grabbed Beatrice's wrists, wrenching them behind her back with practiced aggressive force. "Beatrice, you are under federal arrest for racketeering, grand larceny, and wire fraud," the agent stated coldly, ignoring the wild threats. The heavy steel cuffs ratcheted tightly around Beatrice's wrists. The sharp, metallic clicking sound was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. I stood at the defense table next to Jada. We watched the mighty, untouchable dynasty writhe on the courtroom floor in absolute humiliating defeat. Jada slowly adjusted the cuffs of her crimson suit jacket, a look of pure, lethal satisfaction radiating from her dark eyes. We had not just beaten them in family court. We had triggered a federal avalanche that would bury them alive. The morning after the federal raid, the Chicago news networks abandoned all other programming. Every television screen in the city broadcasted the spectacular downfall of Beatrice and her arrogant dynasty. The local stations played looping footage of the wealthy matriarch being dragged out of family court in handcuffs, her ruined designer dress covered in dust. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "Elite Socialite Indicted in Massive Pediatric Charity Embezzlement." The fallout was instantaneous and absolutely merciless. The billionaires who sat on the country club board, the very same people who used to drink Beatrice's expensive wine and laugh at her jokes, turned on her like a pack of starving wolves. By Friday afternoon, they had filed a colossal class-action civil lawsuit against her estate. They used federal racketeering statutes to freeze every single asset she owned. Her sprawling mansion, her luxury vehicles, and her remaining domestic bank accounts were instantly locked by federal judges. Beatrice went from being the most powerful woman in Chicago to sitting in a cold concrete holding cell, relying on an overworked public defender because she could not access a single dime to pay for private representation. Trent fared even worse. He sat in federal lockup, desperately hoping his young, beautiful mistress would bail him out. He thought Vanessa would wait for him. Instead, the 24-year-old assistant took one look at the federal indictment, carrying a 20-year prison sentence, and immediately turned on him to save her own skin. Vanessa sat down with the federal prosecutors and sang like a canary. She handed over every single text message Trent had ever sent her. She provided emails where he explicitly detailed how he forged my signature on the commercial loan. She signed a comprehensive immunity deal and flipped state's evidence, leaving Trent completely defenseless. When Trent used his one phone call to try and reach her, the automated operator simply informed him that the number had been disconnected. He was left with absolutely nothing. With Trent and Beatrice sitting behind bars and the fraudulent ex parte order officially nullified by an apologetic and furious Judge Patterson, I drove straight back to my house in the suburbs. I did not just walk through the front door, I reclaimed my territory. I hired a premium commercial locksmith who arrived within 20 minutes. I stood on the front porch and watched with intense satisfaction as he drilled out the old hardware and installed heavy-duty reinforced steel deadbolts on every single door. The loud, heavy mechanical clacking of the new locks sliding into place sounded like a declaration of absolute independence. I walked into the master bedroom and opened Trent's custom walk-in closet. I pulled out industrial black trash bags. I grabbed his tailored Italian suits, his silk ties, his expensive watches, and his golf shoes. I shoved them all into the plastic bags without an ounce of care. I dragged 10 heavy garbage bags down the stairs and tossed them directly onto the curb near the street. I wanted the entire neighborhood to see that the arrogant real estate executive had been permanently evicted. At 3 o'clock, I drove to Lily's elementary school. The principal had been informed of the court order reversal. When the final bell rang, I stood by the front gates, my heart pounding with overwhelming anticipation. Lily ran out of the building wearing her bright yellow backpack. When she saw me, her face lit up with pure joy. "Mommy!" she yelled, sprinting across the pavement. I dropped to my knees and caught her, wrapping my arms around her small body so tightly I thought my chest might burst. I buried my face in her hair, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and crayons. The agonizing terror of the last 48 hours completely washed away. "Did you catch the bad guys at work?" Mommy Lily asked, pulling back to look at my face. I smiled, brushing a tear from my cheek. "I caught all of them, sweetie. They are never going to bother us again." I brought Lily home and let her play in the backyard. The house finally felt warm and safe. The toxic, suffocating presence of my in-laws had been entirely scrubbed from the walls. Just as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the neighborhood, a sleek black luxury sedan pulled into my freshly secured driveway. Jada stepped out of the car. The brilliant corporate attorney looked like a conquering queen. She wore a sharp white suit and carried 2 crystal glasses along with a chilled bottle of vintage champagne. She walked up the porch steps, and I opened the door to welcome my sister-in-law inside. We walked into the kitchen and Jada popped the champagne cork, letting it bounce off the ceiling. She poured the bubbling liquid into the glasses and handed one to me. "To the absolute destruction of the ultimate wicked mother-in-law," Jada declared, raising her glass high. "To the end of the dynasty," I replied, clinking my glass against hers. We both took a long, satisfying sip. Jada set her glass on the marble counter and offered a cold, deeply satisfied smile. "I officially filed my divorce papers against Colin this morning," she announced. "Because he committed federal wire fraud using our marital assets, the judge granted my emergency motion for disproportionate asset division. I legally seized 60% of his remaining law firm shares. Colin is currently sitting in a cheap motel room completely broke, waiting for the federal prosecutor to offer him a plea deal." I laughed out loud, feeling a profound sense of justice. We had completely dismantled the powerful men who thought they could treat us like disposable property. But Jada did not reach for her champagne again. Instead, she opened her sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a fresh, pristine manila folder. She placed it flat on the kitchen island. "We won the war," Gwen Jada said, her voice dropping back into a serious professional register. "Beatrice and Trent are going to federal prison. Our assets are secure. But there is one final loose end we need to tie up before we can completely walk away from this toxic family." I looked down at the closed folder, my investigative instincts instantly flaring back to life. "What did you find, Jada?" She tapped her manicured finger against the thick folder. "Beatrice did not just embezzle money from the pediatric charity," she explained, her dark eyes locking onto mine. "She used a third-party corporate consultant to help her hide the cash offshore. And you are never going to believe who that consultant is. Jada slid the pristine manila folder across the marble kitchen island. I opened it and read the top document. Beatrice did not just use a random third-party corporate consultant to hide her embezzled charity funds. She used Colin. Beatrice funneled the stolen pediatric foundation money directly through her oldest son's wealth management firm. Colin was so desperate for his mother's approval that he blindly signed the offshore transfer authorizations for over a decade without ever auditing the origin of the cash. He was not just framed for the commercial bank loan, he was the primary facilitator of a massive federal crime spanning 12 years. We did not hesitate for a single second. Jada and I handed that specific folder directly to the federal prosecutor the very next morning. Colin lost his law license, his equity, and his freedom. The entire dynasty collapsed into dust, leaving nothing behind but their own shattered egos. 6 months passed since the day the federal agents kicked down the courtroom doors. The brutal Chicago winter melted away, giving rise to a bright, vibrant spring. Jada and I did not just survive the absolute destruction of that toxic family. We built an empire on its ashes. We combined our distinct skill sets and opened our own firm right in the heart of the downtown financial district. Jada is the lethal corporate attorney. I am the senior forensic accountant. We cater exclusively to women. We protect women who are being financially manipulated, surveilled, or crushed by wealthy, powerful husbands. When arrogant men try to hide their assets in secret offshore accounts, I track the digital footprints and find every single stolen dime. When those same men try to use high-priced lawyers to intimidate their wives in family court, Jada completely destroys them in front of the judge. We became the most feared legal and financial defense team in the state of Illinois. We take their money and we give our clients their freedom back. The federal justice system moved with absolute merciless efficiency against my former in-laws. Beatrice thought her high society connections would save her. She was entirely wrong. The billionaire country club elites she stole from personally pushed the federal prosecutor to seek the absolute maximum penalties. Beatrice was convicted of federal racketeering, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The judge looked down at her from the bench and handed her a 15-year sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary. The woman who used to drink $1,000 champagne and mock my foster care upbringing is now wearing a scratchy, ill-fitting khaki uniform. She spends her days washing stained sheets and scrubbing concrete floors in the prison laundry room for 12 cents an hour. She has no makeup, no designer suits, and absolutely zero power. She is just a number in the system. Trent did not fare much better. His attempts to blame his mother failed completely thanks to the raw audio recording of his closet confession. Vanessa, his young mistress, testified against him to secure her own immunity deal. She told the prosecutors everything she knew about his fraudulent real estate deals, leaving him totally exposed. Trent was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for bank fraud and illegal wiretapping. He lost his vice president title, his luxury real estate portfolio, and his freedom. He filed for absolute bankruptcy the day before his transport to the correctional facility. He is penniless and entirely alone. Today is Saturday. The sky is a perfect clear blue and the air is warm and sweet. I am standing in the sprawling green backyard of the house I now own, completely free and clear. It is Lily's 7th birthday party. But this year there are no arrogant real estate developers making snide comments. There are no fake smiles and no suffocating expectations. The catering is simple, the guests are genuine friends, and the air is filled with actual joy. Jada is sitting at the patio table under a large white umbrella. She looks stunning, relaxed, and incredibly wealthy. She finalized her divorce exactly on her terms. She stripped Colin of his remaining legitimate assets before the federal government seized his firm. She raises her glass of vintage champagne toward me and laughs loudly at a joke one of the other mothers just made. The brilliant, resilient African-American woman, who was once treated like a disposable asset by that family, is now thriving and completely untouchable. I watch my daughter run across the bright green grass. Lily is chasing a cluster of floating soap bubbles, wearing a bright red superhero cape over her party dress. She is laughing so hard she can barely run. She is safe. She is protected. She will never know the dark manipulative cruelty of the people who tried to use her as a pawn in their greedy games. I promised myself I would break the cycle of trauma I experienced in the foster system, and I kept that promise. I walked toward the edge of the patio to throw away an empty juice box. I looked down into the tall outdoor trash bin. Sitting at the very bottom, buried under crumpled wrapping paper and discarded paper plates, are the shattered plastic remnants of a brown teddy bear. The hidden camera is nothing but crushed glass and broken wires. It is a piece of garbage, just like the people who tried to use it against me. I do not feel anger anymore. I do not feel fear. I look at the broken toy and I smile a deep, genuine smile. I raise my glass of champagne toward the warm afternoon sun. I am not the helpless orphan they thought they could crush. I am a mother, a business owner, and the architect of my own absolute freedom.